Hello everyone, my name is Tori Hicks and today I will be presenting to you guys about trauma response literature and bibliotherapy in the classroom to support struggling adolescents. One of the most unfortunate but important aspects of the K-12 classroom is childhood trauma, its effects on students, and how teachers must go about supporting students undergoing trauma or recovering from traumatic events. When one thinks of a teacher, they may not realize the wearisome scenarios that come with teaching, such as watching students silently struggle with their fears, family matters, and mental health, and how important it is to take action to assist students in need. These situations include students who have lost parents or friends, live in poverty, have absent parents, or who have experienced natural disasters. The importance of literature in students' lives is a resource that's been taken for granted. If teachers and parents understood and saw silent cries of adolescents, they would understand their need for help, and that literature about trauma is a powerful way to support and build connections with struggling students. Sherman Alexie, author of The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, explains in an essay titled, "Why the Best Kid Books Are Written in Blood," that he writes because of his own personal traumas. He writes books for teenagers because he remembers what it feels like to battle trauma alone. Alexie claims he doesn't write to protect them. It's far too late for that. I write to give them weapons in the form of words and ideas that will help them fight their monsters. He considers adolescent literature to be a pathway for individuals to navigate through their traumas. If students feel supported and safe in the classroom, there's a possibility that there will be an increase in engagement. And if we incorporate trauma response literature that mimics their same life situations, they could benefit psychologically by overcoming or dealing with trauma and with their enjoyment of reading altogether. The period of adolescence in a young person's life can be difficult for any individual due to the excessive physical, mental, and psychological change that occurs as one learns and grows through maturation. Adolescence is described by Mark Sulzer and Amanda Hartland-Thien, who are college professors with degrees in secondary English, and their journal article titled "Reconsidering the Hypothetical Adolescence and Evaluating and Teaching Young Adult Literature as a Period of Storm and Stress," which means that young adults are experiencing a variety of difficult changes in their lives that can be very stressful and strenuous. Because adolescent years are challenging, trauma during adolescence occurs frequently. The article, using young adult literature to help pre-service teachers deal with bullying and suicide, claimed that for Americans between the ages of 10 and 24, suicide is the third leading cause of death. Adolescents consider suicide due to various traumatic issues such as bullying, anxiety, or loss or betrayal of parents or friends. There are other health issues that could also arise during adolescence, such as depression, self-harming behaviors, or eating disorders. Since adolescence is a difficult period in a person's life, teachers and parents must have ways to support students to attempt to ease suicidal thoughts, depression, self-harm, or eating disorders. Since we have young adult novels that could help adolescents navigate through struggling times, teachers and parents should give their young adults the option to engage with this literature. Scholars such as Brian Cavanaugh, Donna Miller, Amber Moore, Deborah Begaray, Mark Sulzer, and Amanda Hartland-Thien have commented on the aspects of trauma in the classroom and how young adult novels support students undergoing trauma. These critics all propose that trauma literature is an essential part of the classroom because the novels are relevant and relatable to students' lives. And trauma has always been a part of the learning process. These scholars, however, do not discuss how the literature can assist in the overall needs of our students. I would like to add to the conversation surrounding trauma response literature with a focus on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how giving students access to trauma response literature could assist with meeting the needs required on Maslow's pyramid, using the novel The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie as an example. I'm primarily interested in the way that Helen Collins Sittler, educator of 42 years and affiliate with Indiana University of Pennsylvania, represents Maslow's hierarchy of needs in correlation to trauma in the classroom. Sittler has successfully demonstrated how trauma is an immense topic in the K-12 classroom and that teachers are failing to support students' psychological, physical, and emotional needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. When thinking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the most basic level addresses psychological needs, the need for food, water, warmth, and rest. Next is the need for safety, which includes security along with safety. Then is belongingness and love, then esteem needs, and lastly, self-actualization. As basic needs are most important to ensure survival, in order for an adolescent to reach any other level, each level must be met on the pyramid. Not only do students need food and water to survive, but they also need support from outside resources to help them through struggle and challenging times. Without assistance, students may not have any sort of coping mechanism to maintain a strong mental health. What Sittler does not cover, however, is the way that trauma literature can help students cope with and deal with trauma, which can possibly provide the needs required from the other levels of Maslow's hierarchy pyramid. When students are able to view literature that parallels with their own life situations, it could show them how to navigate through their own circumstances. When students see that they're not alone in their struggles, as characters in novels will suggest, the parallelism may provide them with the safety needs on Maslow's pyramid through feelings of secureness. After they feel secure in their surroundings, trauma literature can provide them with needs even higher in the pyramid, such as love and belonging, esteem needs, and eventually self-actualization. Trauma literature is the missing piece for teachers to help support their students in reaching the safety, belongingness, and love needs on Maslow's pyramid. Unfortunately, however, some educators and parents are resistant to using literature about trauma in the high school classroom due to the intense topics that are discussed in the pieces. Brian Kavanaugh states that students must be given the choice to read adolescent literature. Many adolescent novels are banned from schools because the topics are claimed to be too dense and deep for students. For example, the book The Hate You Give, 13 Reasons Why, and The Color Purple. These books cover topics such as suicide, racial prejudice, and violence. I'd argue that Kavanaugh is correct on his stance for including young adolescent literature into the classroom, but not only because they're interesting for students, but too that it can help students deal with stress and hardship. Amber Moore and Deborah Begaray also claim that trauma literature is essential in the classroom. In their essay, they state, "Trauma has always been part of learning and teaching. Since the effects of student trauma are brought into the classroom, why should we ban books or withhold them from students when they could prove to be beneficial for their well-being?" Mark Sulzer and Amanda Hartling-Thien claim that the books we give students to read must be relevant to their lives. I agree with this and will add that the books students are required to read in schools today, such as Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, may not have the saving qualities of books that are more relatable to the lives of our students. Donna Miller adds to this discussion by claiming that young adolescent novels contain relevant and relatable information that adolescent readers can readily identify with. In her essay, Tough Talk as an Antidote to Bullying, she includes The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian on the list of bold books that could be beneficial to students. Books like The Absolutely True Diary could benefit students and help them meet the needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid through the relatable content and events that mirror their own lives. I believe that it's important to incorporate trauma literature in the classroom as a way to keep students motivated, as they're able to read texts that are unique to them and their situations, but also to provide students with relevant and relatable texts to increase their engagement and spike their reading interests. Arnold, the main character of Sherman Alexie's The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, deals with many of the same traumas that our adolescents go through, which makes this novel a great novel to include in the high school classroom. Melissa Schiebel explains in her essay that Arnold experiences racism, lives in poverty, and deals with alcoholism. If students can read about Arnold experiencing traumatic events, they may be able to cope with these problems in their own lives by showing them how others handle the same situations, and that they're not alone in their uncertainty. If students are given this opportunity to connect with characters in a young adolescent novel, they can potentially learn how to meet their own needs of security and belongingness on Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. Arnold embarks on his experiences and shows how he meets his safety needs, which includes his experiences in intimate relationships and with friends. Throughout the novel, he doesn't think he would need friends, but he realizes that there are people who care about him. He matures and sees how beneficial they are to his life. Arnold says, if you let people into your life a little bit, they can be pretty amazing. That's found on page 129 in the Absolutely True Diary. If adolescents are given opportunities to see this, they may be able to figure out how to meet these needs in their own lives. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian and other young adult literature like it may serve as a mirror to let students know they're not alone, and it's not only for students experiencing trauma. The topics discussed in the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian are dense and mature. However, high school level students are experiencing the same nerve-wracking traumas that teachers and parents deem as too mature for them to discuss. To include this novel in the classroom and others like it, teachers and parents must educate themselves on the traumas that revolve around students' lives to adequately support them through their struggles and challenges. When teachers are not properly trained, they're unprepared to deal with tragedies that revolve around students' lives. One way that teachers can familiarize themselves with trauma that adolescents go through is to read adolescent literature about trauma to see instances where trauma could be present in an adolescent's life. Teachers can read novels such as The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian to consider the issues present in the adolescent lives and the obstacles adolescents might face in schools. When teachers understand the issues that students face, they'll understand the need to support them and ways in which they can do this. Teachers can use The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian as a whole class novel to ensure that students are receiving relevant and relatable texts that they can connect to. Arnold experiences traumas such as alcoholism, racism, and living in poverty. He also shows how he connects with new friends as he moves to a new school, and how he deals with bullying because of his social differences. This novel will be important to all students dealing with these issues, but especially students with various ethnic backgrounds. Arnold is a Native American who is discriminated against because of his race. He stands up for himself and searches for opportunities to better his life. Arnold moves to the school Reardon, an all-white school located outside of his reservation, to attempt to escape from the stereotypes that surround the Native American culture. The stereotypes that they'll never be successful or do anything special with their lives other than exist. If students see how Arnold is stereotyped, they may realize that they're not dealing with these social issues alone. If they're encountering the same stereotypes and situations that Arnold is going through, especially. Arnold moved to a new school where he had to make new friends and learn how to fit in. Many of our students may be new students who have moved from elsewhere and are trying to fit in at a place where they feel as if they don't belong. Maybe our students aren't new to the school, but maybe they're new to other clubs and experiences, such as joining the football team or chess club, church. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian can give students resources and ideas of how to fit in, make friends, or release themselves from toxic situations. The study of adolescent literature is important due to the elements that are embedded within the novels and the connections that students can make with the text. Bibliotherapy has proven to aid students through the many challenges that they're faced with. Bibliotherapy, which is the process or activity designed to help individuals solve problems or better understand themselves through their response to literature or media, is a big way that teachers can support their students, whether they're going through trauma, facing their fears, or simply learning how to live life. When an adolescent is going through trauma or is struggling with their fears, having a supporting piece of literature that strongly identifies with their situations will allow them to learn about their own real-life situations. With all the chaos going on in the world, school shootings, crime, death, war, it's imperative for teachers to have multiple resources that will aid students. Fear and trauma are natural in a child's development, and no fear or trauma is too minute that it should be overlooked. Adolescent literature and the use of bibliotherapy could prove to be helpful to some and not others, but it should always be an option for adolescents. Teachers and students are required to meet curricular goals. Teachers must not hold back information or knowledge that will be beneficial to students and their well-beings. A teacher's responsibility is to ensure that students are exposed to important information that will be beneficial to them in their education. Since fear and trauma exist in the classroom, keeping students from feeling scared and helping them cope with these issues is essential to making sure that they're getting the education that they deserve. Especially now, as communities continue to struggle to mitigate the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, there's more fear and trauma in students than usual, which makes the need for intervention even higher. A school should feel like a safe place for students to learn about ideas and topics that they're curious about, and somewhere that supports them on their journey of life by making content relatable to them and allowing them to read adolescent literature rather than holding back because the novels contain controversial topics. School will be more enjoyable to them and possibly increase their engagement and reading interest in the classroom. When students are exposed to adolescent literature, there is a possibility that they will have increased involvement in the classroom and reading altogether. Teaching the same novels that have been taught for decades does not give students the opportunity for growth in the modern world as adolescent literature does. Students often struggle with classic texts that were written in past centuries. Not only is the content unrelatable to their lives and the current issues of society, but the language that the texts are written in is often difficult to comprehend and understand compared to today's English. Young adult books are often modern, relatable, and interesting to students because the topics that are embedded within them foster connections between the characters and students' lives. Textbooks are another resource that are too heavily relied on in the classroom that leads to disengagement with students. Narrative text in adolescent literature can produce more powerful and creative thinking for students. The language used in textbooks is often too difficult to read and learn, not to mention the amount of information that's packed inside of them. Textbooks are important, but should not be the framework of the classroom, where in many cases they are. If teachers can rely more on using narrative text, students will be more engaged and interested in what they're reading and learning about. The information that educators teach students should not remain the same throughout the years. History is important, textbooks are important, but the world is forever adapting, and students should be exposed to newer information and modern narratives to stay in contact with present-day society. To be an excellent teacher and to produce superb students, one must consider student values and desires when deciding what content to include in the classroom. A teacher must allow students to have choice in what they do, in hopes to provide students with a more productive learning atmosphere. When students are given the choice of what to read, write, or create, they will take more interest in the work that is at hand, leading to more learning and increased depths of knowledge. To ensure that students are given choice in the classroom, teachers can allow students to read adolescent literature through independent reading or when reading a whole class novel. If a teacher is wanting the class to read a novel together, they could provide students with multiple adolescent novels to choose and vote on to be read together as a class. Adolescent trauma will always be a factor in the classroom, one that will continuously distract students from learning if teachers do not intervene and provide resources to help students make sense of their traumatic and fearful situations. The period of adolescence altogether is a tough time for students, as their bodies are continuously changing and developing. Teachers can support students through this part of their lives if they allow them to read and connect with characters in adolescent literature. Adolescent literature has proven to be more helpful than harmful in the classroom and provides students with a starting point to figuring out their lives and how to cope with and deal with fear and trauma. Adolescents have needs, those specifically addressed in Maslow's hierarchy, that can possibly be met through the study of adolescent literature. Adolescent text can provide mirrors into students' lives and show connections between the student, characters, and events that occur in stories. This will show students that they are not alone in their struggles and challenges. Schools have a tendency of banning some of the most relatable and relevant texts to students' lives. The texts that get banned could provide students with the opportunity of a higher education and the ability to think more actively and critically. Teachers must not fear discussing dense topics in the classroom. They should not be afraid of exposing students to novels that contain mature topics. When teachers hold back from reality, they're limiting their students' abilities. Adolescent literature can provide calming effects through bibliotherapy and help students who are going through challenging times. Adolescent literature can make students feel safer in their learning environment, which could lead to increased engagement in the classroom. Also, adolescent literature could prove to increase students' interest in reading, opposed to the less relevant older novels that students are required to read in schools nowadays. We must make a shift in the educational experience and replace some of the classics with modern texts that could help students mature and grow through their traumas or life experiences. Since trauma is an underlying influence on student learning, and a teacher's goal is to support students, teachers must allow adolescent texts to be explored in hopes that it will enhance the overall well-being of our students. Teachers must give students opportunities of choice to choose books and material that are important to them. We cannot assume that our students do not need assistance in their lives. We cannot assume that they are reaching their needs beyond the classroom. We must do all that we can to ensure that we are providing resources to progress their lives and support them as best as we can. Adolescent literature can provide a pathway for adolescents to navigate trauma, so it is essential that teachers allow this content to be explored in the K-12 classroom. Thank you.